He was doing it alone, in the shadows, with the door closed and the lights low, and I was the one hovering in the hallway, barefoot on cold wood, staring at a strip of dim light under his door like it was some kind of boundary line carved into the floor. I knew I had a choice: turn around and pretend I hadn't seen anything, or step over a line I could never step back from. The house was too still. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the eerie kind that makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. The refrigerator hummed once and fell silent. Somewhere a pipe clicked in the walls. Even the air felt like it was holding still, as if the whole house was waiting to see what I'd do. I stood there, hand hovering above the doorknob, heart drumming in my ears. The glow beneath the door flickered faintly, like a screen being turned or a candle overwhelmed by its own darkness. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to listen. But when you've been alone long enough, even silence starts to sound like an invitation. I tell myself I didn't go looking for trouble, that I was just checking on him, that any decent person would worry about someone shutting themselves away night after night. But that's only part of the truth. The other part is uglier, more desperate. I was lonely, the kind of lonely that makes your own reflection feel like a stranger, and when you're that lonely, any sign of life, even behind a closed door, pulls at you. He'd been disappearing into that room every evening. No music, no laughter, no TV murmuring in the background, just a door that closed and didn't open again until morning. At first I told myself it was grief. Of course it was grief. He'd lost his mother. He was in a new place. Everything in his life had shifted. I repeated that to myself like a prayer. He just needs time. But time passed, and the house only grew heavier with things unsaid. That night, something felt different. I could feel it in my chest, like the moment right before a storm breaks. I didn't knock. Not at first. I just stood there, fingers resting on the cool metal of the doorknob, frozen in that tiny space between thought and action. I wish I could tell you I walked away, that I took a deep breath, turned around, went back to bed, and pretended I'd never stood there at all. I wish I could tell you I did the right thing. But the truth is, after a certain point, I wasn't sure what right even meant anymore, because what do you do when you discover your own emptiness reflected in someone else's eyes? What do you do when you feel another person's isolation vibrating in the same frequency as your own? I wasn't just checking on him. I was searching for something too, not romance, not lust, not in the beginning, just existence, recognition. I wanted someone to notice that I was still here, that my heart was still beating inside this body that had become part of the furniture. I wanted someone to look at me and actually see me. No one tells you how dangerous that need can become, how rarely it starts as desire. Sometimes it starts as a hunger you can't name. Sometimes it's not about wanting to be touched, it's about not wanting to vanish. That night, my fingers tightened on the doorknob, and the person I had always believed myself to be, faithful wife, reasonable adult, responsible stepmother, wobbled, like a picture frame hanging crooked on the wall. Once that frame tips far enough, you can't pretend it's straight anymore. If you've ever lived in a house where you feel like a ghost, if you've ever felt the weight of your own hand hovering over a door you're not sure you should open, maybe you'll understand at least a fraction of what I did next. My name is Claire. I'm 38, married. From the outside, my life looks neat and well organized, like a staged photo in a real estate listing. 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, a car that starts every morning, groceries in the fridge, bills paid on time, a husband with a respectable job, a decent suit, a LinkedIn profile that reads like a success story. You could look at it all and say, she's fine, she has everything she needs. Inside these walls, though, there's an echo. My husband, Daniel, is the kind of man who thinks that providing is the same thing as being present. He's always in motion, airports, hotel lobbies, conference rooms with those, long tables and tired chairs. When he's home, his body is in the house, but his mind is somewhere else, tied to emails, meetings, numbers, presentations. He scrolls when we eat. He checks messages at red lights. He falls asleep clutching his phone like an oxygen mask. Our conversations have shrunk into logistics. What's due? What's for dinner? Which day the plumber is coming when he's flying out again. We used to talk about dreams, plans, stupid little things that made us laugh. There was a time I felt chosen, like he looked at a crowded room and saw only me. I'm not sure when that stopped. Maybe it wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was 1,000 small ones. A touch that didn't linger. A kiss that landed more on routine than affection. A night he rolled away from me in bed and never rolled back. Eventually I stopped asking why. It felt like trying to hold on to water. I got used to the empty side of the mattress, the dim light of the TV flickering over my dinner plate while he answered messages in another time zone. I made peace with the sound of forks scraping plates in silence. I convinced myself that this was adulthood. Stable. Normal, safe. And then his son moved in. Leo was 19, tall, slender but not fragile. There was a density to him, a weight in the way he carried himself, like he was always bracing against an invisible wind. He was Daniel's child from his first marriage. I'd met him a few times over the years, Christmas visits, awkward dinners when he was younger, polite nods exchanged between people who are technically family but feel like strangers. His mother died suddenly, a car accident on a rainy night that knocked the breath out of everyone who knew her. For a while, Leo lived with his aunt in another city. Then he got accepted into a college near us, and Daniel suggested he move in to save money. "It'll be good for him," he said, sliding the idea across the table like it was nothing. "And it'll be good for us, too. Family, you know?" I told him, of course he should move in. How could I say no? It was the practical, compassionate thing to do. But the day Leo walked through the front door with his duffel bag and that tired look in his eyes, something in the house shifted. It wasn't a dramatic storm, just a slight change in pressure. The air felt different. The hallways felt narrower. He was quiet, especially at first. Not rude, not warm either. He spoke like someone crossing a narrow bridge, careful, measured, afraid of making a wrong step. He kept his hood up around the house, headphones resting around his neck or clamped over his ears, eyes mostly on the floor or some distant point past your shoulder. I tried. I really did. I asked Daniel what Leo used to like when he was younger and tried to cook versions of it. Pasta the way he remembered, a dessert they used to bake together. I wrote sticky notes. "There's lasagna in the fridge if you get hungry later," or "good luck on your exam today." I offered rides when it rained. I made sure his towels were always clean. He thanked me politely, but he never asked for anything. Our dinners became a strange kind of play where no one remembered their lines. Daniel sat across from me, phone beside his plate, glancing at it like it might perform a trick at any moment. Leo sat at the end of the table, shoulders slightly hunched, answering questions with one or two words. "How's class?" "Fine." "Need anything for school?" "No." "How's the workload?" "Manageable." "And me?" I smiled. I made sure the food was hot and the napkins were folded, and I pretended the silence didn't feel like it was pressing against my chest. Sometimes I'd look at them both, father and son, sharing a table but not a conversation, and I'd feel this strange hollow ache. Here we were, three people with lives intertwining on paper, and yet each of us seemed to be sitting at our own invisible table. I'd catch flashes of Leo in the hallway. He moved softly, like he didn't want the house to notice he was there. His footsteps were careful. He closed doors gently. He carried the kind of heaviness that doesn't show up in photographs. I told myself I understood him, that we were both grieving something, just in different forms. He'd lost his mother, suddenly and cruelly. I had lost a marriage that still technically existed. It's strange how you can mourn something that's still sleeping beside you every night. When Daniel left for work trips, 4 days here, a week there, I didn't feel much of anything anymore. No missing, no anger, just a quiet adjustment to a slightly different version of the same emptiness. But Leo's presence that lingered, not loud, not dramatic, just there like a low hum in the background. We'd run into each other in the kitchen late at night, both reaching for something from the fridge. He'd be in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hood pushed back, hair a little messy from sleep. I'd be in a robe, clutching a mug I didn't really want. He'd nod. I'd say, "Hey," or "Can't sleep either." Sometimes I'd feel the space between us stretch like elastic, nothing overt, just a few seconds too long of shared air. I told myself I was imagining. It took less than a month for my view of him to change, though I hate admitting that out loud. When he first moved in, I saw Daniel's son, the boy I'd watched grow from a lanky preteen to a quiet teenager, a kid navigating a life he didn't choose. But grief, time, and proximity have a strange way of rearranging shapes. One afternoon, he came back from the gym. I hadn't noticed when his shoulders had grown broader, when the angle of his jaw had sharpened, when the softness of youth had given way to something more defined. He walked past me, tossed a hay over his shoulder, and something in me stuttered. I caught my breath, and I knew something had changed. Whether it was him or me, I wasn't sure. I tried to shove that realization into the farthest corner of my mind, the one where I store things I'm afraid to examine. I kept my routine, laundry, cooking, cleaning, pretending everything was normal. But once you notice a line, you can't unsee it. You can only decide whether you're going to step over it. Leo started spending more time in his room. At first it seemed natural. 19-year-olds like their privacy. They like their screens and their headphones and their own little caves. But after a while, it felt less like solitude and more like retreat. He skipped dinner some nights. "Already ate," he texted from upstairs. His door was usually closed. Sometimes I'd hear the faint murmur of dialogue, the soft thud of bass, the clicking of keys. But then there were stretches, silence. Long, empty stretches. One night, on my way to bed, I passed his door and saw a thin line of light underneath, soft, flickering. I slowed just for a second. Then I heard it, not voices, not music, a rhythm. Fast, repetitive, low, the kind of sound you recognize even if you don't want to. My body went rigid. I shouldn't have done anything. I know that. I should have turned and walked away, let the closed door stay closed. But before I could stop myself, my knuckles tapped gently against the wood. A reflex, like when you say sorry after someone bumps into you. Inside, I heard sudden movement, a chair scraping, fabric rustling, the hurried shuffle of someone caught off guard, then the soft, sharp click of something being closed, a pause, then his voice slightly tighter than usual. Yeah? My mouth was dry. My heart was racing faster than it had a right to. Hey, I managed. I was just checking if you wanted anything before I head to sleep. Tea, snack, anything. A beat? No, I'm good. I would lie beside Daniel, his back turned to me, his breathing already deep and even. The glow from his phone would fade as he drifted off, screen forgotten in his hand. I'd stare up into the dark and picture the thin line of light under Leo's door, the tension in his voice when I'd knocked, the way his eyes had flickered over me in the kitchen. I hated myself for thinking about it. And yet I didn't stop. I kept flashing back to younger versions of myself, 17, 21, 26, always trying to get someone to see me, sitting on the edge of a bed, waiting for a text that never came, putting on lipstick, then wiping it off because it felt ridiculous to be hopeful. I had thought marriage would cure that ache, that it would finally give me a place to rest. Instead, I had just learned a more elegant way to be invisible. Leo hadn't asked for any of this. He hadn't crossed a line yet. He was just existing in the same house as my unmet needs. But sometimes that's all it takes for something dangerous to grow. The glances changed first. I started catching him watching me, not accidentally, but with a hesitant sort of focus. When I walked into a room, his eyes would flick to me and stay for a second longer than polite. When I set a plate in front of him, he'd look up, really look, like he was trying to memorize something. One morning, I was stirring sugar into my coffee when I felt it, that prickle in the back of my neck, the awareness of being watched. I turned my head slightly and found him standing at the counter, spoon in hand, cereal forgotten. His gaze was on my hands, the small motions of my wrist, the way my hair fell over my shoulder. He didn't look away immediately. Neither did I. The first touch came soon after, and it was so small it could have been dismissed as nothing. We passed each other in the hallway, space too narrow, shoulders almost brushing. His fingers skimmed along my arm, light but unmistakable. Not an accident, not entirely. His skin was warm. My heart reacted faster than my mind had time to scold. Then there was the moment in the kitchen, when we both reached for the same dish. My hand landed on the edge of the plate. His hand landed over mine. His thumb pressed just for a second that felt like a doorway. We both froze. Instead, my fingers found themselves drifting into his hair, just lightly at first, as if I were soothing a child after a nightmare. But he wasn't a child. His shoulders were broad under the thin cotton of his t-shirt. The lines of his face were carved by something harder than childhood worries. My hand moved, tracing a path from his hair down along his shoulder. Not a caress, not quite, just a touch that lasted a fraction of a second too long to be innocent. I could feel the tension in his body, the breath he held, the way he didn't move away. When I realized where my hand had settled, how far that imaginary line had shifted, I snatched it back as if I'd touched a stove. Heat crawled up my neck. Shame sat heavy in my stomach. He opened his eyes and sat up slowly. For a second, I braced for anger, disgust, something that would jolt me back into the role I was supposed to be playing. Instead, he just looked at me. There was no accusation in his expression, no shock, just a kind of fragile understanding. Like we were both standing on the same thin sheet of ice, and each of us knew the other had heard the cracks.